Hi. I don't know if this is a shallow question after you talked about all these like moving things and people really connecting with you. Is this something that you're able to monetize, or is it just like a passion project?
What's happened, and I think this often happens with personal projects, is they can become commissioned work. So since the blog kind of, once the blog kind of gathered a little bit of steam, I started getting commissioned projects. So I actually do quite a few commissions now. Like this past summer, the past 2 summers, I've done commissions for the Minneapolis Parks Foundation, where they've had me go out to different neighborhood parks in Minneapolis and do interviews from the parks. I just wrapped up a project for the city of Minneapolis that's going to launch on Monday. So there's been commission work has come out of it, and then I also came out with a book. So, which, monetizing, books are not exactly monetizing your work. Let's face it. But definitely, yes, the personal projects, often can become paid work. Thankfully.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Passion
it
turns
happens
into...
a lot. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Hi, good morning.
Hi.
I had a question on any of your encounters. Has there been anything that has been so affected to you personally and emotionally?
Oh, tons. The thing about it is I'm able to create a very intimate kind of a situation. It's why I usually choose to approach people who are by themselves versus people who are, with a friend or something, because I can really create something very kind of intense. And because I'm able to gain people's trust pretty quickly, they tell me some pretty intense stuff. Sometimes they tell me stuff that they've never told someone else before. I would say the most maybe dramatic example of that was one day I approached a man, young Latino guy, probably in his 20s, down by the Central Library, which is my absolute favorite place in the world, by the way, for many reasons. But photographically speaking, looking for subjects, the library is just rich. And this guy told me that he had been sexually assaulted. And at that point, he hadn't told anyone except the police and his building manager, who got involved because he actually ended up bringing this guy to court, and he was convicted. And for basically 45 minutes, I just sat there, and this guy just dumped. And in fact, he told me the story not once, but twice. He walked through the assault. And I'll never forget it, because I went home and I just crashed. I just collapsed from just that energy. But I feel like, again, my most important role in this whole project, it's not photographer, it's not editor, it's being that active listener and being that non-judgmental ear, and just making myself available to people to listen to whatever they have to say. That's the most important thing I do. But yes, that can be very draining emotionally for me, because I feel a connection with every single person that I've ever interviewed.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your inspiring work. It's amazing.
Thanks.
I'm wondering, you're talking a lot about connecting and community, and I'm wondering if you ever have an interest to and an opportunity to meet with other people around the world who are doing what you're doing, so you connect on that level, especially in terms of how much compassion you all are giving out.
Yes. In fact, there is a secret Facebook page that is different Humans of Page administrators from all over the world. Brandon Stanton is not one of them. He is not part of the group, but there's, I want to say maybe 200 people in the group. They're not all active. The thing about this project is there was kind of a big boom and a bubble, let's say, of people who started projects like this. I'd say the vast majority of them are not still doing them for various reasons, mainly probably because it's so time consuming. But I've made some great connections with other humans of page administrators, and we talk about the things that the challenges that we run into, and it's great because it feels like these are the only people I know who are really doing this very specific and kind of odd thing that we do. It's not normal to walk up to people on the street and ask them personal questions and take their pictures, So that's been a great and unexpected kind of outcome from all this. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm interested, when you started this, you were talking about how you made this connection on a street where people were not connected, you were not connected. When you put that energy out there, when you actually had embraced it and were living that and are living that, I'm just curious, what have you noticed about the change of the energy coming back to you? In other words, being connected to people on the street, not interviewing, but what have you noticed about how the whole paradigm has changed since you've been putting that energy in that direction?
Well, it's changed me in a really profound way, and what I've realized is that what I've been practicing is not photography. What I've been practicing is empathy. And a big part of that is that initial, what I was saying, when I study people and try to determine kind of their current mood or kind of where they're at. And I've become very, very good at like reading people. Again, body language, facial expression, and it's changed the way that I move throughout the world so that now I find myself kind of constantly, not constantly, but more often than not, like I'm really checking in with other people and what they might be feeling at the moment and kind of where they're at. And it makes me feel much more connected to the people in my community.
So I'd love to go back to the question about making connections, and you shared the story about the man who shared a very, very deep story with you. Have you ever run into compassion fatigue or, where you just become depleted? Because I think as people who identify as creatives, we tend to be slightly more empathetic, perhaps even empathic. So can you share a little bit about your own practice of taking care of yourself?
Yes, it is very draining. Now I'm prepared for it. That's the thing. When I first started, I started this not having any idea why I was doing what I was doing. I just felt compelled. Like I say, it's the only word I can really think of where it's just like, it feels like it should be, it just feels like what I should be doing. But over time, and as I've become better at what I do, because I wasn't good at it initially. I was terrible at it. When I first started approaching people, I can't believe anybody said yes, because I was so nervous. My energy must have just been so like, who is this chick, But now that I've calmed down, actually practicing yoga is a big part of how I maintain balance in my life. But I definitely do experience compassion fatigue. But now I'm more prepared for it, and I allow for that in my timeline, where I know that if I'm going out shooting for a couple hours on a certain day, nothing can really happen after that. Nothing can be scheduled after that because the energy won't be there. So I build rest and relaxation into my schedule. Mm-hmm.
I had a question about, you were talking about the marginalized communities in which you approach in Minnesota. I just was wondering how you reconcile that with the way that it's like photographing and taking these stories from marginalized people within the community, how you reconcile that with furthering your career. Like if you think that it has furthered your career and like how you approach that.
The thing about that is, initially when I was doing it, part of my nervousness was because I did feel that I was taking something. But what I've learned is that what I'm actually doing is giving something. There's an exchange that happens. It's not just me going out and collecting stories for my own benefit. It's giving back to people. You can't underestimate the importance of that being seen and heard and acknowledged. So if I spend 45 minutes listening to a homeless person tell me about their struggles, I'm actually offering something to them, which is, again, that non-judgmental ear. So, and I gotta say, I've developed relationships, real relationships with many of these people. So they are people who are still present in my life, if Facebook, if not, in beyond that, even in other ways. So I've stopped thinking of it as that I'm just taking things from people, because I don't believe that that's what's happening.
Stephanie, I think the photos are great. I love the portraits. Just curious, I know you mentioned that the project is about connection and connecting with people. Will the project work if you do candid photos or kind of more in the moment photography, when you're just catching people kind of more off guard and not prepping them for a portrait? And my second question is, in terms of what you've learned, what is it about people that that you've learned, I guess, that they're willing to just share these deep, intimate secrets and moments with you, just a total stranger? Like, why are people doing that?
First question, I'm not interested in taking candid photos. It's just not, there's nothing wrong with taking candid photos. A lot of photographers take candid photos. That's just not my personal interest. For me, it's always a collaboration between myself and that person. And so, again, the photography part of it feels just as kind of one-on-one and intimate as the conversation. So it's just an extension of our conversation. So I just am not, I'm not trying to catch people off guard. That's just not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is make that connection with them and have that connection come through in the photo. A candid photo, you're observing, and that's fine. But I'm not there to be an observer. I'm there to be a collaborator, like I say, with that person. Part two of your question, why do people tell me the things that they tell me? It's a really good question. I really think it comes down to, again, that need to be heard. People want to tell their stories. People love talking about themselves. And so when you give someone an opportunity and you take interest in a person and you really, and I'm not taking an interest, when I talk about active listening, what I'm not doing is sitting there listening to them thinking about what am I gonna say next? How we kind of tend to do that, we're kind of half listening. I listen to people very intensely, and I feel like there's not a lot of opportunities for that these days. We certainly don't do it with our families and friends, right? We don't really listen, when I'm listening to someone, sorry, but my husband or something, a lot of times you're kind of half listening, or you think you already know what they're gonna say next, and so why should I really, and I'm kind of also trying to do something else. This is what our lives have become. We're now this situation that, I've just created an opportunity for true, deep, compassionate listening that I think people appreciate and want. And then I just create a space, I feel, what I do, to me, is it's a practice. It's really an active meditation where I'm just completely focused on that person. They're focused on me. Everything else kind of disappears in that moment. So I'm also trying to create a safe space for them to reveal whatever they feel like revealing.
Steph, I've known you a long time, and congratulations.
Thanks, David.
Great work. I think it might be interesting for people here to hear your thoughts of going from staff graphic designer to figuring out what your passion is and now how you do that full time and kind of that move.
Yeah, I mean, my background, my training's in graphic design. My training's not in photography. Like I say, I've practiced photography my whole life, but I'm largely self-taught other than, kind of a seminar here and there. And I was in the graphic design world for a very long time. I was a magazine art director for almost 10 years. And, just did photography was kind of my hobby on the side. Really, I think there was a shift at some point. As an art director, I hired a lot of illustrators, and I collaborated with and worked with a lot of photographers and illustrators. But there was always this part of me that wanted to be the creator. It was like this is great. Like, I love working with illustrators. I love collaborating with people in that way. But there was a part of me that just felt like, boy, but if I was the person actually like making the thing, what would that feel like? So that was kind of going on in the back of my head. And then, frankly, the reason I left the magazine world is because I was unhappy at my job. I was just in a situation where I didn't feel my gifts were being used and appreciated. And because I had been kind of, building up this following with the blog, I just kind of thought, maybe there's something there. And it was around that same time that I got contacted for my first commission, which was also actually for the city of Minneapolis. And that kind of gave me hope, because it was like in the back of my head, I thought, there's something to this. If I just had enough time to really dedicate to this thing, maybe I could make it like a thing that maybe even makes money. But at that point, that just seemed like, no way, But the kick in the butt I needed was simply being unhappy at my job. And that's when I left and decided to, and I also teach. I started teaching during this whole period as well. So that's when I took the leap, and I just thought, you know what? There's something about this. I know that I can do something with this, and I'm just going to take that risk and see what happens. And then everything else just happened sort of organically. It just kind of evolved, but mostly it was just doing the work, getting out there, doing it again and again and again, and learning the hard way, and making mistakes, and making a fool out of myself, and asking the wrong people, and having people get really mad at me, and getting yelled at by people, or just even interviews that just don't go anywhere, where I'll interview somebody, and what I'm getting is like yes and no questions, and so I'm just like, okay, what am I, how am I going to edit this? I mean, it doesn't work. So that's when I just developed that almost, I think, sixth sense for spotting people who are just going to be more open.
I'd love to know if you ever have the opportunity, or does the person you're interacting with, do they ever ask you, or do you ever share your struggles with people?
Once in a while, people will kind of turn the tables on me and give me a little taste of my own medicine. And I gotta say, I always feel very uncomfortable. But it's humbling, because it's just like, okay, fair enough. And yes, I'm a very open person. I'm an open book. Anybody who knows me knows that what you see is what you get. So when people do ask me kind of like the same question, I try to be as open and honest as they've been with me. But it also reminds me that kind of being in the hot seat is takes a lot of courage. And so it makes me appreciate what they're doing even more. Well, thanks so much.
Thanks, Stephanie.